Honestly, it's kind of funny doing it with like a family member.
Right? I was
Uh,
gonna ask, I'm like, are we open about being sister-in-laws or
Yeah, of course. Of course. I think that that's like a cool element too, because I mean, we've had so many conversations at like every single family occasion, and I always interrogate you on what you do and your processes and this and that. So, hence why you're here, because I'm like, you're so interesting. People need to hear, not just me. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You're pretty interesting too. I've been enjoying your solo episodes so far. I still have to catch up on some of the others, but I love hearing about how you run your business. So
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, like your hands are full right now. You have a newborn at home and a toddler, so can't blame you. Mind you, you must have a lot of free time too with a newborn in a way, right?
in a way, I mean, it's just starting because I've sort of gotten her finally to sleep more independently. But
Okay, good.
you already know this about me. I love to read, so
Yeah.
my first recourse that I do when I have free time is usually I read a book.
Yeah, probably a better option than like listening to podcasts or watching TV. So good for you.
I'm not sure. I think it just depends on your mood, but I guess I feel starved from the books, so I go there first.
Yeah, no, I need to get better with that. Honestly, I feel like I've been digesting so much information listening to things because I'm always wanting to be outside, like walking the dog or going for a
Yes,
run and whatever. And recently, I've actually felt almost like too like overly stimulated that I've just been listening to like nature. I'm like,
that's
I
totally
need
fair.
to completely disconnect right now and not be constantly like shoving information down my brain. But anyways,
It's so easy to get overstimulated for sure. But I do the same thing when I walk sometimes. You with Clara, I'll like that's when I'll put in the pod, so it's kind of nice.
yeah. Okay, so you are an organizational development and leadership consultant, which to some people, they're probably like, what the hell does this girl do?
A totally fair response. It's like I feel like I'm constantly explaining it, so that's
Perfect. So we have
fair.
an hour to figure it out. So in essence, like your practice is focused on forging meaningful relationships between people, environmental and structural forces. So for people who are less familiar with this terminology, like how would you define environmental and structural forces? Like what does that mean in the world of leadership consulting?
It totally sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, but I'll try my best to explain it. So, environmental really refers to sort of the context in which a business is operating. So, like if you're a hospital, for example, if I'm working with a group of nurses, well, there's a lot of emotional labor in that. There's a lot of environmental factors that are outside of the hospital's control that's going to influence the way that they operate.
Mm,
So when I talk about the environment, it's the same for your business. So like there's opportunities in your business, there are barriers in your business that are environmental. They're not things that you directly influence or control. So understanding that and how it is actually influencing the behavior of people within an organization and how it's influencing the organization itself is one way of looking at it.
hmm
And structure is like, I think maybe what people probably are more familiar with, which is just like, how are the business processes happening? Like, what's your work process look like? Let's say, you get a client, what does that look like? And then when you distribute work, what does that look like? And then for every single one of your employees, when they execute a task, what does that look like? So I think people are more familiar with looking at business processes. So I'm looking at
hmm
that. I'm looking at the environment and I'm looking at people. How are people actually functioning within the organization? What does leadership look like? What level of autonomy, what type of task variety exists, etc. So I'm looking at all those factors, often in relationship to one another, to get sort of a portrait
Yeah.
of how an organization works.
No, it makes sense. So like are you going in every single day to these organizations when you get a contract? What does like a day in the life look like? Are you working every single day for them? Are you juggling multiple clients at a time? Are you focused on one?
I mean, both. It depends, right? So I've had my practice for over 10 years, I'd say at this point, and probably over 15 years actually. And there have been years where it's multiple clients, and there have been years where the mandate is such that, or the system is big enough that they'll be my only client for like a year.
Hmm.
I would say to you, it really depends on what I'm being tasked to do, the size of the team, the size of the organization, and the challenge or opportunity that is presenting itself.
So
So
like give me an example of like maybe one of your more recent clients and like what that looks like to give us better context.
sure. So I was recently working with a branch of the federal government of Canada, and without going into any detail, I would say there was a multifaceted contract. You had a lot of leaders who were new to leadership. They had a large team of untrained people who had been sort of squeezed into these different roles. So
Hmm.
there was a huge need for training on two fronts. There was like the technical need to train people on things like change management. And then there was the need to train leadership on management, right? And I use the word management loosely because I kind of hate the word, but we can have that conversation another time.
Why?
But because I feel like management evokes command and control, and to me, that's not really what it's about. Like it's about clarity.
So you're saying like to use leadership over management.
Yeah, I don't actually think they're very interchangeable, but I recognize that that to most people they are. So I think management is the more approachable term.
Mm.
But working with people, like how do you lead a team of 20 people? How do you lead a team of 5 people? How do you break down tasks into manageable pieces? How do you actually assess where people are at? How do you evaluate performance in a group of people that really don't necessarily have what they need yet to be thriving, but you obviously like you want to build them. And that doesn't mean just like shitting all over people.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean micromanaging people either. So there's nuances to this stuff. And in this particular organization too, there was a restructure that was going on. So we weren't firing anybody, but we did have to like fundamentally change the way the teams were set up, dismantle certain teams and recreate new ones and shift people around. So that kind of a contract had a lot of moving parts.
Hmm.
So I didn't accept other contracts
So
when I was
in
doing
that
that.
type of situation, are you like interviewing all the stakeholders to understand what their roles and responsibilities are, how they can fit in? Like basically, because you're completely restructuring, right? Almost giving them
Yeah,
new roles sometimes, even.
yeah, essentially. And the way my own practice works is like to put it really reductively, I don't work with assholes.
Love it.
I won't work with somebody who seems like they don't have the best interest of the organization or other people at heart. So
Hmm.
I require the leaders I work with to be open and to be coachable, I guess
Yeah.
is the main term. And like, so, it's kind of scary when things aren't going really well and you ask a leader like, hey, can I speak with every single member of your organization, and also I'm not going to tell you what they said. I'm just going to come back to everyone, yourself included, but also to all the other people that I talk to, and I'm going to present you guys back with some of the sort of common truths that are emerging, some of the tensions that are emerging, and I'm going to check and vet my recommendations with every person that they impact.
Mm.
And so some information might be reserved for leadership for sure, but there's a certain amount of privacy as well as a certain amount of disclosure that leaders have to sign up on before I proceed. And if I'm not able to do that, then I won't take that kind of a contract.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, when you get to a certain point in your career, you can put your foot down and be selective in who you're working with. Like, I think a lot of people who are starting off might not be able to relate because they're like, I'm going to take whatever I can get to get the experience. Some people work for dirt cheap or for free, even just for literally the experience. But obviously, 10, 15 years in, you have that privilege to be able to be selective. So good for you. Like, I'm in the same boat. I feel the same way. If something doesn't feel right, why would I do it for the money if it's just going to cause me like mental instability? It's not worth it.
Totally, totally. And Dee, you can be a cleaner is the term, right? Like sometimes you could be the big bad wolf who comes in and helps to clean out an organization. That's not the kind of contracts that I take.
Yeah,
Um, they pay well,
but
but
no,
yeah,
not into it.
no.
So you mentioned something about like tensions. So I'm sure that you've seen certain patterns kind of come up as you've worked through all of these many clients, and assuming that, already, even in the way that you're saying that you're interviewing all these stakeholders, every single company is going to have something different that needs work in its structure and organization and leadership, et cetera. Um, what would you say are like the main red flags that you see reoccurring throughout organizations?
It's funny. You would think there would be more commonalities from my
Really?
perspective. I mean, there are and there aren't, right? It's almost like I don't know. They're kind of like snowflakes organizations, right? Like I know that sounds cheesy, but I stand by it. Like there are very unique pressures and tensions because people are really different too.
Mm-hmm.
And the environments they operate in are so different. But I guess like some of the common ones that I see are more just like our ability to hold multiple truths at the same time and actually speak to each other honestly about where things are at, what's working, what's not working. And again, make room for those different perspectives rather than try to get everybody to just agree on the one thing. So like
Yeah.
certainly from a leadership perspective, I think that's often quite difficult. A leader will come in and they will be convinced that like this is what's not working, right? And they're just convinced that that's the problem and everybody else needs to see this problem. And it's not that they're wrong. It's just that that's only like part of the puzzle. And as you start talking about the other members to the other members of the organization, they start sort of uncovering more of that problem, right? And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, sure, that's true, but it's also because this is how this operates, or they don't talk to us when they make these decisions about XYZ. And then what we get is, a picture that's half formed, and then they get mad at us because we didn't anticipate the thing they never told us about. So it's like there's layers and there's relationship between usually what's not working. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like I pride myself on like if I had a superpower, it'd be seeing the best in people. And I'm like
Oh.
actually very serious about that. I truly like I work with clients where I'm convinced everybody is actually a pretty good person and they want what's best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I situate my conversations with clients is that we're not there to throw stones at each other. We're there to understand what's not working, even if that means talking about some uncomfortable things. Like maybe our leadership style isn't working. Maybe we think we're being really permissive with our staff when their experience of us is the opposite. Like let's talk about that. And let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about what it would take or what would need to change in the process and how we do things for staff to feel empowered. Let's talk about what it would take for you as a leader to feel like you could trust them. So, you know what I mean? These are difficult conversations to unpack. Those to me are the more interesting contracts. I also do contracts that are just like straight up mission, right? Like, let's evaluate where we're at and how we can get to where we want to be. Those
Yeah,
are
because
simpler contracts.
I was going to say, even from like a sustainability standpoint, like you must have some kind of like structure that you follow or rubric to use for evaluation. It's like, yeah, they're all a little different, but like why I ask about those commonalities is like if I'm relating it back to my business and how we do things, there is a pattern, you know? I mean, it's different, the types of services. I'm not really evaluating a business to completely change it, but I am sometimes rebranding, right? So that does mean interviewing stakeholders at times, understanding what's working, what's not working more from a marketing perspective. But yeah, it's true what you say is that like there can be, what did you say, two truths or multiple
Yeah.
truths, right? That just because one person sees something one way and another sees another doesn't mean that one is right or wrong. Like they can both be true. And I really love that. I feel like I could even relate that into my personal life. It's like we can have separate point of views and still be friends, you know, or like work together, whatever it may be. You're always going to have your own opinion. And just because it's not exactly the same as someone else's doesn't mean that you can't coexist and work
Yeah.
well together or still have interesting and respectful conversations.
Yeah, and there's usually a point of convergence too. It's more like
Mm-hmm.
let's not actually throw out the parts that are different, that are a little unique. I
Right.
think the commonalities are hard to come by, I guess, for me in some ways, but it does almost look like I often find myself I listen a lot. Corey, my husband makes fun of me all the time. He's like sometimes I pass by your office and he's like, I just hear such like emotional charge. And he's like,
Really?
but at a group level, and I guess that's the difference. Like,
Okay.
I'm no therapist, right? Like, one
Mm-hmm.
to one would be therapy, and I feel like at a group level, you're working in systems. Like, and to me, if you're trying to work at an organizational level, then you're always working with the group.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means holding space is the term. I hold space a lot for difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So it requires a lot of facilitation, a lot of structured dialogue, and some prep. Usually, if emotions and tensions are really high, then I'll do a lot of one to one work beforehand to allow the group conversation to go forward with a sense of safety.
Yeah, it's funny you say you're not a therapist, but I feel like I've said this to you before. Like, you kind of are. Like, even when it comes to our conversations, you really do such a good job at holding space. It's not even just in your work. Obviously, it translates in your personal life and like seeing the good in people. Like I see that in you and I look up to that. Like I really love and admire that in you and want to kind of like take that in to what I do because I don't always have those rose colored glasses on, you know?
Well, thank you. I think I've told you this before. I admire the hustle. You're somebody who I think is incredibly ambitious and you go for it. And I so admire that. And yeah.
You do too, honey.
Oh, I don't think, honestly, I don't think I have some drive. I'm not saying I
You
don't, but
do. I
you
think you
have,
do.
like, I admire your drive. I definitely don't have that level. I'm like, I'll get like one solid contract for the year, and I'm like, okay, I've hit like let's say at least 100 grand. I'm good. I'm done. Like I'm not gonna hustle anymore after that.
Yeah,
Where it's
because
like,
all you need is one contract to hit 100 grand. Not my contracts are not 100 grand. I gotta hustle a little more to get more, you know?
but that's not always true. Sometimes I do have to hustle for like a few. But I'm just saying, like I don't. I feel like you're the kind of person. Like, look at you. You're doing a podcast in addition to your full time business. I feel like I admire that, and I'm like, I don't know where you find the energy for that.
Well, listen, I don't have children yet, so maybe that's why things might change the second I pop out a couple babies. You're in a bit of a different situation. Actually, speaking on the topic, I did want to dive into a little bit of like the family dynamic because
Yeah, sure.
you have maybe a little bit of a less traditional dynamic going on right now. Most people, not most people, I think a lot of people see it as like the man is the provider. He's the one who works and the woman stays home with the kids and takes maternity leave and And not that you're not on maternity leave because you are, but your dynamic in having, a toddler and now a newborn is that your husband, Corey, has been the one staying home while you continue to work, right? So, were there any challenges that kind of presented themselves in that, or has anyone, I guess, challenged you guys because it's maybe a little less conventional?
I mean, okay, to be clear, he does work part time.
Okay.
So I have to say that or he'd be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
Um, but you are right. There was a period of time where he was off completely. But I'd say in the last year or so, or 2 years, I should say, he's been working part time.
Hmm.
Um, Nobody has ever really made comments to us, probably because I tell them to fuck off. The only person who ever like slightly makes passive aggressive comments is probably his dad.
Yeah.
But
Old school mentality too, right?
it's very old school. The person who's the hardest on Corey is probably Corey because despite
Mm,
him being, I think, like the most incredible father, and I mean that like sincerely, I'm
he
sure you've
really
even
is.
glimpsed it. He's so on it, and like even at home, he is not. I say this to my girlfriends all the time sometimes when they're complaining. They're like, my husband doesn't help with laundry. My husband, I'm like, what? Why would you marry somebody like that? But anyway, people make choices, okay? So, like,
Listen, and look, those people sometimes are together because like they're good for each other and that works for them. But if you're going to complain about it, that's a different story. If it's something that you've agreed upon and you're good and that's your agreement and whatever, fine. But like I'm with you. I mean, like I need the support. I need the
totally.
50-50.
Like equity, not equality, all the way. But like you said, if you're complaining about it all the time, then it obviously doesn't feel too equitable. So
Yeah.
I would just
Yeah.
say it's really a convenience thing for us. Like I mostly work from home.
Mhm.
I sometimes work out of the house for him. Like he works in renovations and construction, and like often the sites he has to go to are like really far away. And
Yeah.
so he, it's. I was like, look, our kids are only going to be really little for a short period of time. You can either not see them very often, or we can like kind of lean into our privilege and let me carry a majority of the financial weight, and then they
Mhm.
get to actually like enjoy their dad all the time, and you don't have to like miss out on so much. So yeah, but I think he feels, it's hard to shake a lifetime of machismo being ingrained in you. So I think sometimes he feels self
Fair.
conscious about it,
Mhm.
and wonders if he's not doing enough. But I think he's fine. He's great.
Yeah, honestly, like to jump on what you were saying about him being a good dad, I think I told this to him last time. I said, "Thank you for being such an amazing example for my husband Ryan because well his brother, right? Because he's so freaking good with the kids and it's so cute and sweet to see that I'm like if Ryan is anything like this when we have kids, like I'm freaking lucky, you
Oh,
know?"
for sure. Honestly, I feel like I feel very confident that you and Ryan are also going to be awesome, awesome parents. I can tell by the way you guys hang out with Ellie.
Oh,
It's like all natural, so it's good.
thanks. Yeah, she's the sweetest. She's so cute. Oh my God, I can't the shared album. The pictures from her birthday, they're so freaking cute.
Well,
Anyways.
I think, but seriously, I think all three boys, Jared, for listeners, is the grumpiest of the brothers. Even he is amazing with kids. So I feel
He
like,
is. I was most
yeah,
surprised by him, to be honest. Not that, like, I feel bad that we always like kind of like shit on him for being like the grumpy, moody guy. But I mean, like, he kind of is, but also he completely flips a switch when he's around kids. It's so interesting to see. And they're going to have a baby soon, too. So that's
yeah,
exciting.
he's going to be awesome. I mean, and look, we tease him, but I would say it's teasing.
Yeah.
He's not actually grumpy all the time for your listeners, but compared to Ryan and Corey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I have a question for myself because I've had challenges, being a leader in my company and really kind of finding that boundary and fine line between like being friendly and making friends with my team versus like just like leading them and being their boss kind of thing. Because I feel like sometimes I become too friendly and they feel like they might be able to take advantage of me, but then I don't let myself get taken advantage of. You know what I mean? Like I find I kind of like jump back and forth. Like I feel like I'm conscious and trying to do a good job, but at the same time, like I really like these people and we also share a lot of our personal lives together, but it's like how much is too much, and where do we draw the line, so like what advice would you give to someone who's in a position like me who has a team that they're leading, that they're kind of also really friendly with, like what advice do you have for that?
And I don't have a strict set of advice on that. I think that's a very personal decision. The only thing I would encourage you and others to do in your place is, to have your boundaries be clear.
Mm-hmm.
So where is that line for you? What does taking advantage of you look like in your mind? What does it look like in real life when you experience it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's your response to that? Are you prepared to reinforce the boundary when you need to? If you
Right.
are, then go for it. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not, and you feel like that's something that I'd really rather avoid having to do, then you might want to think twice about becoming friends with your employees. Um,
Yeah.
but to me, it's really, yeah, are you prepared to remind them where the line is when you need to? And do you know what that's going to sound like so that you're doing it intentionally and gracefully and not sort of, having that snap of a reaction that sometimes we have as human beings, which is
Mm-hmm.
natural when we feel like somebody's trying to take advantage of us.
Yeah, I feel like in the past, like it's been a lot easier to navigate something like that with someone who I was a little less close to, because I didn't feel as like emotionally involved, I guess, in their lives. Um, and not to say that like these things really happen often, but sometimes there is a point where I'm like, I feel bad about having to have the conversation because I really like the person and I've kind of become friends with them. But I'm also like, listen, I'm also running a business and I can't just like give you everything that you want and let you do whatever you want. Like we do have to follow a certain set of kind of like guidelines. So that's where it's been a little challenging for me at times. Like overall, I feel like I do a decent job, but I know that this is definitely a thing that even like some of my friends have brought up as a challenge for them. So I figured it would be helpful for our listeners if someone else could relate.
I mean, I'm into prevention personally, and it's something I would do at staff meetings periodically, is reminding people what the permissions are. So, like,
Mm,
do you have like three? There are 3 personal days available for everybody. So remember, like, if you're having a bad day, everybody's entitled to, like. So what sort of are what's available to your employees? And I would remind them purposely in group settings,
right.
so that we all know that regardless of my relationship with you one to one, this is what's available to everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say what you just told me you said to somebody, like I would say that at a group setting. Like, as you guys know, there are some of you that I consider some of you my friends, and in the spirit of fairness, in the spirit of business, these are the kinds of rules that I can't really bend. So I just want to remind everybody that this is what's available to you. I encourage you to use them if you need them. But so
Mm,
I like to do things nicely but firmly.
yeah. That's a good approach. I'm like pondering, I'm like, how am I going to have my next conversation? I'm already workshopping in my mind. Oh, that's great. Thank you. In terms of building relationships, so you've had so many clients over the years. I want to talk about what it looks like in terms like from a business perspective. Do you have repeat clients? Are all of your clients referrals? How do you get business?
I do have a lot of repeat clients.
Okay.
Um, in the last few years, I get headhunted a lot, which is very flattering. I don't know why, but I do. I think
From
like
like LinkedIn?
sometimes from LinkedIn. I guess sometimes like other organizations I've worked with, like tell people who tell people.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's like I'm sure it's the same for your business. Like your work is your signature, right?
Yeah.
So I always try to leave my client system better than when I found it. I'm not a superhero. I can't come in and fix everything perfectly, but I do my best to always leave clients better than when I found them.
Mm-hmm.
And leaders often know, like, you hold space, like, the system usually has the answers that they need within themselves. You're just kind of helping them to unearth it. So, with that said, if you do a good enough job, then yeah, they usually will invite you back in periodically if they encounter an issue. If they need to redo something like a strategic plan, then they'll usually reach back out to me. Leadership workshops, I get a lot of repeats for leadership. One to one coaching. I don't love doing mediation, but I do mediation. But I usually won't do that as a standalone contract. But if
I
I've
feel
done
like
it
if
for you
anything,
once,
that's the
I'll do it.
closest thing to therapy.
Yeah, I don't love it, but I've done it. I'll do it again. But again, because you take contracts in my world, you they're like, here's the presenting problem, and then like you're 3 months in, and you're like, okay, that's not the actual problem. Like we need
And
to
so
work on this.
are you spending like a year? Like what's the average length of a contract?
Oh, it depends. I would say the average length is probably like 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
With it going up to like max 2 years before I will usually like, because the other thing I'll try to do is like, I'm not there to become a permanent employee. So usually by the end of year two, I'm trying to train somebody to, like, if there are functions that I've taken on that need to become permanent, then I'll usually work with the leadership team to actually give those functions to somebody so that they can stop hiring an external person to do it.
Makes sense. So you mentioned like 100K contract. So let's say you get this 100K contract. Is that something that's going to typically take you only over like 4 to 5 months?
No,
Because then you have like half the year off.
no, no, no. When I get something that's like 100 to 150, it's usually a year. It's a
Okay.
year long contract. The smaller ones, when I was first starting, like I would do a half day. I could do something as small as like a half day workshop for like anywhere from 500 to 1,000. Um,
Sweet.
so it depends, right? It really depends.
So how
Uh,
have things differed from when you started out to now? Because like you said, $500 or $1,000, that's like significantly different in terms of the size of the contract. Do you still do smaller contracts like that? Do you have a balance between small and big? Like what is the minimum that you'll accept today?
if I like the client, I'll do whatever. Like there are some
Okay.
clients, there are some if there are some nonprofit organizations that I've worked with that if they want me to come in and do a half day or something, I'll come in and do a half day because I like believe in their mission. I love their
Okay.
leadership team. I think their staff is awesome. I'll even give them a discounted rate so that I can continue working with them. Like so,
hmm
this is like again, it's a luxury to be able to do that, but
And in the essence of building relationships too, that's something I'm sure that they appreciate. You're also seeing this as like long term. If they want me to come back, like let me support them knowing that they're a nonprofit.
yeah, like I have two different scales. So if I am working with a for profit, I charge them significantly more than I will charge a nonprofit organization. I will also have frank conversations with a nonprofit
hmm
CEO or director general is usually the term. And I'll ask the director if do they have a budget for this? Are they taking it out of their own budget, or have they received a grant for
Great.
this kind of work? And like depending on the answers, I will scale. If I really love the organization, I believe in what they're doing, and I can afford it, then I will scale my bill, so to speak,
Do
to
you
what
do
they
you
can
also
afford.
then modify your services with that? So let's say like when you're saying that you're charging them significantly more or significantly less, like what is that, like 50% more, 10% more?
Um, well, let's say I'm doing like a full day leadership for a nonprofit. I might do it for like as little as 750 to 1,000 if I really
Mm-hmm.
like them. And it would be like minimum 2,500 for a for profit.
Okay.
And it's one day.
Yeah.
But it's because it's the prep that I put in before, right? And again, I'll
Yeah.
scale that depending. Like, am I putting together new content? Am I recycling something that I've already built? Do I have something half built that I can work from? Like, so I'm scaling, but
Mm-hmm.
within reason. If I'm starting from scratch and it's actually representing 5 full days of work, then even if you're a nonprofit, I'm not gonna charge you that little. So we
Right.
try to make it work.
Right. So you're
Um,
working smart in that sense because like you said, you're recycling, you're going back into processes and, documents that you've already pulled together for another organization that might be similar, that might have some parallels, right?
yeah, like teaching, learning and development is a big part of what I do. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, this like I've taught at McGill in OD before, Introduction to Organizational Behavior. So I have like entire slide decks on different topics. And then, like, again, depending on the work I've done with different organizations, I have others. So I have a pool of things that I can usually draw from. But obviously, what you can't recycle is like what we were talking about in the beginning. Like, if I'm doing an organizational scan, I'm doing like, 50 interviews and focus groups and I'm trying to pull out things, well, that's all time and has to be done from scratch. And those kinds of contracts take a lot longer. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
time to build relationships with people. I can't actually just get on the phone with somebody and like be like, hey, so tell me everything you don't like about working here. Like, that's not how it works. Sometimes, but rarely. So I have to work at that
The
a
majority of what
bit.
you're doing is now from home, right? Do you ever go
Yeah,
in?
yeah, yeah. I do. Um, I when I deliver workshops, it's usually in person.
In person.
Yeah, the last job I did that was like spanning a year, it was a remote team, so it was
Okay.
it was
Perfect.
largely remote. But I would still meet with the team sometimes in Montreal, sometimes in Ontario. Like I would occasionally show up in person.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it's also strategic to do that. Like networking is important, building
Yeah.
relationships, strengthening relationships.
Yeah, no, I mean, being a remote agency, I make a point to go to the networking events and be in person. And even if it's just here in my local community, like I would love to be closer to downtown Toronto and go to all of those events. And I did when I was living there, and, same thing in Montreal. But it's just obviously like too far of a commute right now. But even though my business isn't largely here in Prince Edward County and Queenie West area, I still make it a point to like be known and for people to know like who I am, just because you never know who knows who and who could eventually become your next client, right? So it's
Yeah,
not that like I'm doing this to just to like get business in the future, but it's also like these people, similarly to you and everyone who I've been interviewing on this podcast, I've probably met in some way or form through an event like this, or just my personal network, or who I've befriended through a business event, and other people who have things in common with me that I can relate to and connect on, because entrepreneurship can be lonely. Like if you don't have friends who do this, it's really hard to get advice from someone who hasn't done this before, right?
100%, 100%. It can be really lonely. I love contracts when I get to like pull in other practitioners. I'm like,
Yeah.
yay! I have my own little team, right? It's the best.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying about networking. I think that's the biggest difference from when I first started till now. And like obviously, when I've done my mat leave, I'm probably gonna have to do a healthy dose of networking again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's going to events. I volunteered a lot. I did a lot of volunteer contracts where I made $0 just for the
Wow.
opportunity to showcase my skill, right? Like I remember doing free contracts for the city of Laval, free contracts for McGill, free contracts for Concordia, like a lot of organizations that I would go on to have paid contracts with, frankly.
Okay,
Um,
good. Yeah. There
but
you go.
like,
That's a
it's
perfect
not a
example.
guarantee. It's not a guarantee, but
No.
it's worth it, I
Yeah.
think, sometimes to do that. In worst case scenario, you still got to do a good gig. And I consider like volunteerism is not really the worst thing in the world. Obviously, you don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to always land that way, but
Yeah. And it's
I
good for
think,
like
yeah,
your portfolio too, right? And your resume for it to be in there. No, I mean, I am slowly kind of seeping my way into public speaking. And I had done a few free workshops with the Small Business Center here in Belleville, and I was then paid to do one after. And I
right?
didn't really expect that, but they were like, "Oh, well, we have this event and we actually have a budget for it." And I was like, "Perfect," Because I know that in the beginning, sometimes you do have to do some things for free. And I'm happy to, especially with public speaking. Like, I think you need to practice. And before someone's going to pay me like 5 grand to talk for an hour or more, hopefully one day, I don't want them to be like, well, she wasn't worth it and then never call me again, you know? So I'm like, at least if I'm doing it for free, I'll build some kind of reputation. And then people work with like coaches too, to present and to speak and to work through their signature talks, etc. So it's a whole other world. And I'm hoping that like as a, I guess, continuation of what I'm doing, I'm able to share what I've been doing and how I've been building and my challenges and my successes and failures and whatever over the years through speaking, right? And
Yeah.
sharing, I guess, with other people and hoping they learn. That's the goal.
No, for sure. I think
Yeah.
that's a great approach, and it's a great mindset. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was my mindset even coming out of school was I need to practice. Even like being a facilitator in like large groups and helping people have difficult conversations also takes a lot of practice. And I was like, what if I'm not great at this? Like maybe it's not such a bad thing to like volunteer to do this with a more experienced practitioner, or like get paid a very like a small honorarium instead of like
Mm-hmm.
an actual charge, because yeah, then the stakes for me felt like a little lower. I was still trying to do my best, but I was like, okay, if I bomb here, if I don't do like an excellent job, I don't have to feel like I've ripped anybody off.
Yeah, but I mean, even the fact that you're working with someone who's more experienced than you, even if you didn't necessarily get paid a paycheck, you were paid an experience and knowledge. Like that's
Yeah.
something like you learned from that person that you were able to take back that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And I'm a huge proponent of that. I would follow along. I have one of my friends that works, well, she doesn't work there anymore, but she used to work at Ardennes in fashion and marketing. And I loved following her journey. And I interrogated her every single time that I saw her. I wanted to know what she was doing, how she was doing, the processes that were in place. Show me the presentations. What were the photo shoots? How did you get the photographer? How did you make the budget? All these things because I don't have exposure to that. And I, to this day, like she's working in tech now. To this day, she's that one person that I would switch spots with, that I would kill to be a fly on the wall. I would spend a year shadowing her for free just to like get that value from the experience in living basically her life and what she's been doing. Luckily, she tells me a lot and I do get it from there, but I think being there is a different story. And even so, she was sent to Miami and LA over the last couple of years for photo shoots, and I tagged along because I can work from anywhere. So I just jumped on a flight, shared the hotel room with her. They were doing campaign shoots for Ardennes, and I kind of was like in the background. I
Was
wasn't
that with
on
the little
every single
dog?
set.
Was that
No,
the
that was a different.
okay?
That was, but same person, different shoot. But no, this one was like in Miami and Los Angeles. The one with the dog, we went to a photo shoot in Toronto for Kai. Their dog was a little model, which was
That's so cute.
adorable. Um, but no, like having been able to just go there and observe what she was doing and how she was doing it was really, really cool for me. And like I basically paid, like I spent money to get
Yeah.
the free lesson, you know. Um,
100%. But you said it earlier, I thought really well. I can't even, when you do those little quotables on Instagram, I feel like you should go back and find that sentence. You get paid in knowledge and experience, I think is what you said.
yeah.
And I feel like that is gold. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, 100%. I agree too. Um, how are we doing on time? We're good.
We have
Okay.
about 10 minutes. Yeah. And my
I
neighbor
have
hasn't said my child is screaming, so we're good.
your child is good. Okay, so I have like one last little question for you, and then we're gonna wrap up with our mindful minute. I want to talk about work-life balance. Like, what does that look like for you? Have you found it challenging to have a social life and family life and work and take care of yourself? Like, what does work-life balance look like to you? And I guess, what do you suggest? Actually, you know what? Let's just start with that. What does it look like for you?
It looks like a work in progress at all times. um,
Ever
truthfully,
evolving.
yeah, I don't feel like I have mastered that at all. I definitely feel, even working from home, there are days where I have felt like I have worked way too many hours in
Mm,
my office. It's also like kind of a bit the nature of what I do. If somebody is in actual like distress or somebody, is only available at certain times. It's like I work around them, and I sort of also need to be available as certain things are happening, right? So there are days where I felt terrible. Like I could hear my toddler knocking on my door, being like, "Mommy,
Mm.
mommy," and I'm like on hour 9 of my day,
Oh boy.
and I feel awful, right? And like my
Yeah.
husband's like sneaking in sandwiches and stuff, and like
Wait, you don't stop to eat? You gotta eat, girl.
I do most days, to be clear, I do most days, but there are times where it's like a bit bad. And so again, it's a work in progress. I say to you, like I have weeks and months where I feel really good, where I feel like,
Hmm.
oh, this is great. I'm working like 7-hour days. I have my like stand to sit desk. I work from home. I'll stop. I'll go for a walk. I'll work from my brother's house. Like, you know, and it kind of a bit like you, like when it's fully remote, I can work from anywhere. So there's a bit of
Yeah.
freedom in that. But I
Hmm.
for sure have contracts that suck me in, and I like do not look away, and it's probably like a good and bad thing because I'm very
But do you
dedicated,
love
but it's
it? Like when
bad.
you're sucked in? Yeah, that's it. Like when you're sucked in, because I, with the whole like eating thing too, now that I think of it, sometimes when I'm really into something, I kind of just forget
Yeah,
because
I don't get
I'm just,
hungry.
yeah, exactly. And then like 5 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, whoa, I'm starving, you know? So like, is it because you're lost? Like, are you loving what you're doing, or do you sometimes
Oh,
feel like you just want to
100%.
run away? Okay.
No, I love what I do. I get sucked in 100%. And like, I love solving problems too. Like, and if I
Mm-hmm.
don't know enough about something, like, I love being in my office and I will just consume large amounts of content about this type of issue, right? Like, oh, psychological safety in an organization. Okay, let's talk about that. It's becoming a popular topic. Let me read the last like 4 books that were written about that. Let's dig back into my like. So it's like I'll go really deep because I love it. Let's watch videos. Let's listen to podcasts. Let's like kind of dive deep. But the time elapses. I would say to you, before having kids, it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
Now that I have kids, whom I love and adore, I I want to hang out with them. Like Ellie's super fun,
Yeah.
and no, I know. You know what? Toddlers get a bad rap. I feel like people talk all the time about how hard kids are, but kids are super fun. And she's chill, like, and she waits and she's patient, and like she'll even come in sometimes say hi to my clients. Like they love
Aw.
her. She's like a really polite little kid.
Yeah.
And she'll go back out and she'll wait for me, and I feel guilty, right? Like she's only
Yeah.
awake until like 7:30, so I have to stop. So my own rule for myself, I try to stop by 4:30, and spend the rest of my time with her. And I always take the
Hmm.
morning shifts. She's an early riser. She wakes up at like 6:30 in the morning,
Hmm.
and I just let Corey sleep. Like I that's my time with my kids.
Yeah.
So I take the
Nice.
mornings and I try to take what I can in the evening. So what falls to the wayside is for sure self care. I'm really hoping to get better with that over time.
Hmm.
Um, but what doesn't fall to the wayside, I'd say, is like I have a good amount of travel, I have a good amount of like socializing with the people that I love. Especially, I prioritize family over friends.
Hmm.
Sorry, friends. Um,
Sorry, friends. Love you, but I love my family more.
kind of. It's okay to say this to your family.
Yeah.
But yeah, because at the end of the day, you only have so many hours, and the
Hmm.
fuller your life becomes, at least I feel the fuller my life becomes, the more difficult choices I have to make about who and how I spend my time.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. Ryan and I don't have kids yet, but we even have trouble finding time for each other sometimes. So it's like things are going to have to shift and change, and priorities are going to, change as well. But I think everyone can figure it out, right? Like God doesn't give us what we can't handle. So
100%. I mean, it's always just shifting, is my
yeah.
experience. And I always tell myself too, like, eventually kids go to school, and you don't really have that time with them anymore. So I guess in my
And
own
then you
head,
miss them. And you wish they
yeah,
were home being annoying.
100%. Like I kind of, I guess while they're not legally required to be away from me, I feel like I should do my best to spend as much time with them as I can.
Of course, of course. Okay, so to wrap it up, we're going to do the mindful minute. It's a segment I do on each of my podcasts to wrap up. So if you were to leave the listeners with one piece of advice in life, in work, in general, whatever, what would it be?
Oh boy. I think not to be deficit based would be one of them. I think a healthy dose of optimism will get you through most things in work and in your personal life. So I think seeing the opportunity, seeing what's right and not just what's wrong, I think helps you to maintain a mindset that breeds success. Um,
I love that.
and other than that, like be confident in yourself. Like Alyssa, you're a confident person. I love that because I think if you're confident, you take appropriate risks and you value your time and you know what I mean? And you take and you do what you love. And I think you're not likely to do that, I guess, if you're constantly filtering yourself and if you're constantly sort of looking on the downside or what if. So I think like have enough confidence to pursue the things that you want. And if you fail, so what? I guess that's my actual response is
I love
so
it.
what? Then you
Do
pivot
it
and you try
scared.
again. Yeah. Do it scared, do it better. I think the expression is fail forward faster, right?
Amazing.
Because
Love it.
that's how you get to success. And if you can't get there, then okay, but at least you tried.
At least you tried. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Emma.
Thank you for having me.
It's been so great. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and see you next time. Bye.